All right, guys, today is Sunday, the 4th of April, 2021. Today marks 24 days I have left to finish my 55 for Starbird's car show. I plan on painting all the rest of the parts to the car early this coming week. And then I'm going to give everything about a week, and then I'm just going to hit it with a sandpaper and the buffer, and then I'll be able to start hanging body panels. Anyway, I got a little bit of stuff done. If you caught the video yesterday on the steering column, I got the steering column installed. It is all bolted down and it's even wired up. So that part of it is done. Other than I pulled the steering wheel back off so I could get in here and access everything very well. So, I got to put my instrument cluster and all that stuff in. I'm going to do that today. But anyway, I'm very happy because I got a steering box in a Tri-5 Chevy without scratching the paint on the column. That is a first for me. I usually put at least one scratch or one chip in it when I do it, and I got away with it on this one. It turned out phenomenal. It looks awesome out here with all the, the shiny paint on the column and the ARP hardware. But it was a little interesting, to say the least, to install. I used ARP 12-point bolts down here, and those bolt heads are too tall to go through that factory bracket. When you slide that bracket on, you try to slide it over the column, it wouldn't clear. So I had to pull two of them out, and then I put an original bolt, which has a thin head, put it in there. Then I took the other 12-point ARP out, so it just had the one factory bolt in it, but it allowed that collar to stay in there. And then I slid the bracket over and started the bolts on that, and then I went back and swapped back out the ARPs, and then just had to tighten them there with a wrench. But man, it turned out really clean. I love it. Absolutely love it. It looks really, really nice. But anyway, I got the column wired, and I finally got to check my dome lights to make sure they work, because the, your dome light, basically you have a brake switch power wire going through there, so you have to have that hooked up before your dome lights work for some odd reason. But, I got the little cover plate on with the 12-point ARP and the wires coming out of it, so it looks pretty clean. Pretty happy with it. But I just use male and female plastic insulated spades. Just for me, it's just a little bit easier, and I had them here. I'd rather have had some kind of connector to undo and stuff, but I didn't have anything here, and I wasn't spending the money and waiting on the stuff to come in, so I just put that stuff on and rolled with it. So anyway, the steering column's in and pretty much done. Today I'm going to try to get the instrument cluster in, finish up some more of the wiring that's hanging into the car, get all that stuff hooked up. I've got my shifter linkage I need to paint. I'm going to paint it today, get the shifter linkage installed and adjusted, and that way the car will be able to go in gear. And I'm kind of hoping that tonight, this evening, I'm going to swap the Wheelwood master cylinder out with the new one, the bigger one, and hopefully I'll have working brakes. And if they do work, I believe tomorrow morning I might put some fuel in the gas tank and prime the bowl on the front of the carb and see if this thing will drive out of this car, or out of this garage out here in the driveway, and then maybe back up. So that'll be pretty awesome. I have decided I'm going to go back to the store, and I'm going to get some more distilled water. I've only got 3 gallons here. I like to mix it 50-50 antifreeze and distilled water, but I'm going to go ahead and go buy a couple more gallons of distilled, and I'm going to fill up the whole thing with distilled water. That way I can have the engine running. But just in case I have a heater core leak, I don't get that nasty antifreeze on my brand new carpet. That water will be a lot easier to dry out than antifreeze. I'd have to wash the antifreeze out of the carpet and everything. So I'm going to do that first, and that way I can test everything out. And then once that's all good to go, I can, drain it out of the petcock and put the antifreeze in and, mix it up. So that's what I'm going to do. So anyway, I had a guy ask me about my firewall. So I thought I'd run you guys through this. I don't think I have any videos of my firewall, but on my build thread at tri5.com, there's a lot of pictures of the firewall work on the car. There's a lot of work in that firewall, and it doesn't even look like it. And I think that's what's pretty awesome. But I want to, really quick, I know a lot of you guys are wanting to do like a stainless steel Allen button head bolt in your front end sheet metal, like when your front fenders bolt to your inner fenders and splash apron and all that stuff. From the factory, they take this style of screw or bolt, whatever the hell you want to call it, but it's a really coarse thread. You can get Allen buttons in that same coarse thread, same size, And the only company that I know of that makes a kit is Old 55. And I can't remember what company I got this from, but that is a part number, and this is for a 56. But that was a front end sheet metal fastener set for a 56 Chevy. But if you look up Old 55 and just put in, front end sheet metal stainless steel kit or something, I'm sure you'll find it for your 55 and your 57 as well. So it come with a whole bunch of stuff. I don't remember what all was in the box. The only thing that was left in this box was those screws or bolts. I don't even know what the hell you'd call these. I call them screws, but maybe they're bolts. But I ended up transferring them all this morning to an empty tray I had here in my tray. But anyway, so if you're wanting stainless steel buttons to go in the factory stuff, that's what you'll need. But they're like a weird thing. They're like a number 12 or something like that. Something weird. I don't know. But anyway, you can order the whole kit from them, and then you'll have everything you need. Let's see, firewall, I'll talk about that. So this is an original firewall, obviously, but I did a big smoothing job on it. What I did was I took from the factory, this upper section is separate from this. So this is pinch welded together, but there's a big deep seam, a trench in here basically all the way across. So what I did was I cleaned all the seam sealer out, and then I blasted it with a blaster. Then I went back with some weld through primer and sprayed it all down inside there. This is solid steel bar from Lowe's. It's, I think, 3 sticks is what I used. And I had to sharpen the ends to a point here and here because the hood hinge comes down lower. But it ended up making it look like a bead roll. So this is all fully welded all the way through here and then ground smooth. But this steel bar is welded all the way around on both sides. Fully welded. I didn't leave any spots undone. I didn't just tack half of it and then called it a day. It's fully welded because, your hood hinges, they're going to be doing this number with tension. So if you just had a few tacks in there, it would end up cracking your filler. But I didn't go all the way down the bottom of the toe board with the bar. I just sharpened it to a point and left it right there. But I welded all this up as well. This part to this part is fully welded on the edge, and then I went back and ground that up like that. But when you go to grind that trench down in there to get that nice little curved shape, you basically just use a 4-inch electric grinder with an old grinder disc, because they always get, when you buy them, they're sharp 90 end, but when you use them for a little bit, they get rounded. So that's what I did, and it just went in there and ground it up real good. And then basically you can take some body filler, mix it up, and just run your finger down it like that, which is what I did. And then to sand it, I used a piece of 3/8 rubber fuel hose with a piece of 120 grit wrapped around it, and that's how I got that piece in there. So lots of smoothing, welded up all the unused crap that's in here. And some of you know the firewall pad on these cars. The firewall pad on the inside of the car, when you attach it, it takes these clips that go from the inside out, and on a 55 they look like shark teeth sticking out of there, and they will take your skin off if you're not careful. So what I did was I welded 1-inch long, 1/4 by 20, they may have been 3/4 long, I can't remember, 1/4 by 20 bolts, and they were brand new CAD plated bolts, and I basically cleaned the CAD plating off the head with a wire wheel on the bench grinder. It just takes a second, so the weld would be nice and clean on it. I drew a little dot right with a Sharpie right in the middle of that head of that bolt, and then you could put that head of that bolt up in the back from the inside of the car and line that dot up in the center of that hole and then weld it up. And at that point, that bolt is dead centered where that clip's supposed to be, and then you can grind it, and you have a smooth firewall, but you have a stud on the inside of the car to hang your firewall pad on. Now what I used was washers and acorn nuts. So it's just a little bit cleaner, and it's a hell of a lot easier to remove than trying to get those old factory clips out of there. 56, they went to plastic. 55s were steel, and they're kind of gnarly. So, and they also chew the shit out of your brand new paint on your firewall if you use your original replacement clips for 55. So that was another reason I did that. But I did lots of stuff. The factory master cylinder takes 4 studs off the brake pedal assembly. I cut every one of them off. The only 2 that I used for this style master cylinder was just 2 of them. Drilled them out, and I welded 2 stainless steel bolts in there. Just welded the heads up to the master cylinder basically the brake pedal assembly. So I have stainless steel studs coming out so I could put my stainless steel ARP 12 points on there. But originally they had 4 mounting bolts or nuts. So this is another thing is this convoluted tube here. I did this to a 56 many years ago. Ended up selling the car. It's just a nice way to route your wiring into the inner fender. I've got a hole saw hold the inner fender because the inner fender wraps around like this. This hooks into that hole, and then the wiring comes up the inner fender and all the way over into here. So I actually welded more 1/4x20 bolts to the back side of the inner fender. That way you can put a loom clamp on your wires, slide it on the studs, and then put a nylon lock nut on there, and it'll hold your wiring up out of the way. So this is, I couldn't tell you what this is off of, but I basically just go to any pull apart salvage and walk the aisles, and you'll occasionally find a door laying on the ground off a new car, and it's, you know, from the door to the cowl on a new car for the power window wiring or radio speaker wiring or whatever. But that is pretty much all I used. Now the problem with this one, that when I got it, the slot inside of this, you know, the groove in it inside there was pretty wide. So the factory sheet metal firewall, the hole was too thin. So I ended up using wire from a clothes hanger that you'd hang clothes on in your closet. And I just bent that wire around a piece of steel tubing that diameter. And then that's how I shaped it. And then I went in there and tack welded it all in until it was fully welded, and then went back and bevel ground it. But that's why it's embossed looking. So that's actually a coat hanger, but it took up the slack in that, so it's not sloppy on there. But lots of work in that firewall, and I'm pretty proud of it. I actually hammered out a piece on these cars. If you had a standard transmission, there's an indent slot that the rod would come through, but even on the automatic cars, there's an indent slot with a big hole in it. And I hammered out a piece and butt welded it all in there and shaped the corner and everything, so that's all smoothed. Welded up, plated in the hole for the factory big rubber grommet that goes here. Now there's just one little tiny grommet for that cable for the wiper motor. I made my own sheet metal piece for this low car flexible dipstick. This is all sheet metaled out, and it's molded into the firewall. And I did it at an angle so you don't have to lay up on the fender to pull that thing straight up. You can just reach over and pull it to you. Some people don't like that angled like that, but I do, because the firewall has that piece that's curved like that. I like it. It's my car. It's all that matters. So anyway, I'm pretty happy with it. And then, of course, on the body mounts, I've cut mine down pretty good. And I built these covers here out of pretty thick sheet metal. And then these are pipe caps. And I hole sawed them out, sunk them in, and they actually slide on, and then they bolt on. And I've got rubber welting that will go around these so they won't scratch the paint up or chip it up or something. So how many minutes do I have left? 13 minutes. Another thing I did on the firewall up here, I rounded all the edges on this, and because these are just pretty much straight cut, smoothed those up real well. I welded nuts into the body right here, 1032 nuts. Originally these just take an 1/8 inch drill bit and number 8 screws to hold your cowl panel on. I used a step bit, opened that up, and I put a nut on the end of a long 1032 screw. And I just kind of held it down in that hole till it's flush, and then tack welded it up even and then ground it. So now I have nuts in there to use ARP 1032s to bolt the cowl panel on. Also drilled and tapped the hole bigger for these hood stop bumpers. These are Ring Brothers. If you plan on using those, you cannot use the Ring Brothers base. It has a base that looks similar to this. I had to use a really thin stainless steel nut that I found online to make that work, because otherwise they're too tall. So I'll show you my cowl panel. I've got it sitting out here so you can get a visual of a before and after. The cowl panel, there's lots of work on it. A lot of guys nowadays will smooth their cowl panel out, get rid of the louvers altogether. I left this thing out here last night and boy, it got dirty. Anyway, this is my cowl panel for my hardtop, and if you'll notice, there's a peak in it off a hood. I cut out this section of louver and butt welded a piece of a hood in there, so now my hood peak will go all the way back. The problem was the hood peak stops before the end of the hood, so on my hardtop's hood I cut this little section out, and I used another section of a hood in there and then capped off the back, so the peak goes all the way to the back right in front of the windshield trim. Just a nice little feature. And I still get to keep my floor vents because I love them things on summer nights when the floor vents are open. Nice, good way of getting some nice summer air in the car, cool air. Also plated in this, made it solid because they're just half moon cut out from the factory, so the ARP bolts have something around them. Anyway, just little custom stuff I done to the firewall, and I think it turned out pretty freaking cool. And it's still an original firewall, which is kind of cool. I like the, you know, smooth firewalls are cool and all, but you know, I like all the factory bead stuff in there. It just looks, you know, from the stamping, to me it just looks cool. And you know, it needs some of that stuff for strength for some of that stuff, especially your brake pedal assembly and you know, your hood hinges and all that crap. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna cut it off there and I'm gonna get back to work. I got a lot to do, man. So I guess I'm gonna work on my instrument cluster and get that thing going. But anyway, thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Probably another video coming up tomorrow.